So, I mean, growing up in Nigeria as a young child, I was one of those kids that hardly ever said anything. I was very quiet. My mom had five sisters. She has five sisters. And we used to have a lot of them in the house, from time to time. And, they would get together and they would talk about everything, that you can imagine. And maybe I was about 3 or 4. But because I was very quiet, I think they always forgot I was in the room. So they would say things that I probably should not have heard. And I would sit down there and just listen because I loved stories. But I started sort of asking myself questions about some of the stories they would tell. And one of the stories that was very common for me to hear were stories about maybe a friend of theirs who had been married for all these years and did not have any children. And, there were all these narratives about women putting a calabash in their stomach and sort of tying a wrapper and going around and looking as if they were pregnant. And of course, after 9 months, there's a limit to how long you can carry on with that pretense. But one of the things I started asking myself very early on was, but what if these women are not lying? What if they really think they're pregnant? And by the time I started writing this novel, it was one of the things that I immediately put in the novel. And eventually I went to sort of do research, like, is this possible in science? And I rediscovered all the scientific basis for a woman who has been under so much pressure about getting pregnant to suddenly the mind tricks the body into being convinced that she's actually pregnant. And so that was one of the concerns that I had in writing this book. And it was sort of rooted in the fact that as a young girl, it became very quickly apparent to me what was expected of me, which was grow up, get married, and have children. It's in some ways it was that simple. And I started questioning, what if I don't want that? Or what if I can't do that? What position would I then have in this society? What position would I then have in this community? And I think that's one of the things that informs this character of Yejide, of how, even though she's very well educated and she has her own business, the fact that she still doesn't have a child, she's sort of less, the respect that she has in the society is not as much as if she has children. Another story I remember from growing up is being, say, on a bus, going somewhere as a teenager, and someone would be insulting a woman, maybe a woman who's like in her mid-30s or in her 40s, and people would defend the woman by saying, why are you talking to her like that? That's somebody's mother. And on the surface, it sounds really nice, like you're standing up for this person. But I quickly began to ask myself, so what if she's not somebody's mother? Does it mean that it's okay for her to be talked to like that? So that's one of the things I wanted to sort of explore in this novel, the way that in Nigeria in particular, in this community that I grew up in, motherhood is mythologized. It's this great and wonderful thing. And I wanted to look at, but what if it's not as great and as wonderful as we've been told it has been? And what is the complication of always only putting women on this pedestal?
Thank you.